And this year, on that birthday party, so we go to a hotel room, I got some girls, and we have drugs and everything, and we're in there, and the police came in, and they found us in there, found the girls, and they found drugs.
Michael Irvin was a legend on the field, but off it, his life spiraled out of control. Sanders saw it all firsthand, and the truth he's sharing now exposes a side of Irvin the public never expected. But what Sanders witnessed inside the Cowboys' infamous White House revealed just how deep the chaos really ran. The dark side exposed: violence, drugs, and Deion's intervention. No one understands the true depths of Michael Irvin's struggles better than his closest friend and former teammate, Deion "Primetime" Sanders. What Sanders witnessed during the Cowboys' most turbulent years reveals an awful truth about one of the NFL's greatest players. A truth so dark that it nearly destroyed everything Irvin had worked for. This is the story you've never heard in full, told through the eyes of those who lived it, about how violence, drugs, and unchecked rage almost claimed the life of an NFL legend. The Cowboys of the mid-1990s were living in a fantasy world. 3 Super Bowl championships in 4 years had created an atmosphere where players believed they were untouchable, above the law, and immune to consequences. Michael Irvin was the embodiment of this dangerous mindset. The first major crack in this facade came on March 4th, 1996, when Irvin was arrested along with teammate Alfredo Roberts at a Dallas area residence inn. This wasn't just any arrest. It was a window into a world of excess that would shock even hardened NFL observers.
And then March 5th is my birthday, and so I have one big party, hang out, have fun, and then that's it. I'm starting back training, you know, and then I didn't do anything. I was just training football, and I would do this every year. And this year, on that birthday party, so we go to a hotel room, I got some girls, and we have drugs and everything, and we're in there, and the police came in, and they found us in there, found the girls, and they found drugs. And
police discovered 10.3 grams of cocaine, over an ounce of marijuana, and drug paraphernalia in the hotel room, along with 2 women identified as escorts. The scene was a damning indictment of how far the Cowboys' culture had fallen from the disciplined championship teams of just a few years earlier. But this arrest wasn't just about drugs. It exposed something much more sinister: a systematic culture of debauchery that had been operating right under the NFL's nose. The investigation revealed the existence of the infamous White House, a rented residence that served as the epicenter of the Cowboys' party culture. The exposure came through betrayal. Dennis Padini, Irvin's former aide, had secretly filmed Irvin purchasing cocaine and sold the footage to local television station WFAA-TV. Even more shocking was how Irvin learned about this infiltration.
And I remember Leon Lett called me a couple weeks before and said, "Hey man, I think we've been infiltrated. You need to shut down the White House." And I said to Leon, "This is not a movie. This is not a movie. So we're not shutting down the White House."
Irvin's response reveals the arrogance and denial that characterized this period. Even when warned by a teammate, he refused to believe that his empire of excess could be brought down. Irvin ultimately pleaded no contest to felony cocaine possession, receiving a $10,000 fine, 800 hours of community service, and a 5-game NFL suspension. But if the drug arrest revealed Irvin's recklessness, what happened 2 years later would expose something far more dangerous: his capacity for explosive violence. July 29, 1998, at training camp in Wichita Falls, Texas, started like any other day. Players were getting haircuts, relaxing between practices, and preparing for what would become one of the most infamous incidents in NFL history. Everett McIver was a 318-pound offensive guard, new to the Cowboys and trying to establish himself on the team. Irvin, the veteran superstar, had made it his business to educate rookies and new players about the team's hierarchy. What happened next nearly ended in tragedy.
And Everett was the new guy. Man, I'm working and we messing with Everett, And Big E and the guys, they started messing with him. You can't let that little receiver mess, dude. And everybody, oh my, over here, cause we were trying to get, okay. And then Everett, you know, cause we had drinks, he get up, dude, to be truthful, and I'm gonna let people know, I was getting my ass kicked. This big old joker was whooping my butt.
The confrontation escalated rapidly. What started as typical locker room hazing became something much more serious. Irvin, despite being significantly smaller than McIver, refused to back down. When the physical altercation turned against him, he made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Irvin grabbed barber scissors and stabbed McIver in the neck, causing a 2-inch gash that required 20 stitches. The wound came dangerously close to McIver's carotid artery and could have been fatal. Blood poured from the wound as teammates scrambled to stop the bleeding and comprehend what had just happened.
I should never have grabbed the scissors, but I was in fight or flight mode, you know what I mean? And dude, I went back to my room right after that, and there's blood everywhere, blood all over me. And Big Cat came in, he said, man.
The immediate aftermath of the stabbing revealed both the depth of Irvin's fear and the complex dynamics within the Cowboys organization. Irvin, covered in his teammates' blood, retreated to his room convinced that he had committed murder and would spend the rest of his life in prison. But what happened next would prove even more shocking than the stabbing itself. Despite the severity of his injury, McIver refused to press charges, making a decision that revealed both his character and the twisted loyalty that bound the Cowboys together.
He said, Michael, you know, he said, I know the severity of what would happen if the truth got out. And he said, man, I don't want to take you away from your kids like you almost took me away from mine, dude. That was.
This moment of grace from a man who had nearly been killed by his teammate speaks to the complex relationships within professional sports. McIver understood that Irvin's conviction would not only end his career, but devastate his family. Jerry Jones reportedly paid an undisclosed settlement to ensure McIver's silence, and no criminal charges were filed. For Deion Sanders, who had joined the Cowboys in 1995, watching his friends spiral into violence and self-destruction was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. Sanders had his own larger-than-life personality, but it was grounded in faith and family values that stood in stark contrast to Irvin's reckless behavior. The relationship between Sanders and Irvin during this period was complex. They were teammates, friends, and fellow Florida natives who understood each other's backgrounds. But Sanders was also watching his friend destroy himself, and he wasn't willing to stand by and let it happen.
There was one time I was out there wilding out. Bad, man, just crazy, white, acting crazy. And Deion showed up at the house. And he said, hey, man, enough, this gotta stop. I mean, Deion bowled up like, let's go. Right now, we're gonna fight right here, right now.
This intervention by Sanders reveals the depth of their friendship and Sanders' willingness to physically confront Irvin when necessary. It also highlights how far Irvin had fallen, that even his closest friends were having to restrain him from destructive behavior. The violence wasn't limited to teammates. In 1996, a Dallas police officer named Johnny Hernandez hired a hitman to kill Irvin for $30,000 after learning of Irvin's affair with his fiancée. The hitman turned out to be an undercover officer, and Hernandez was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But the incident highlighted the dangerous world Irvin was operating in. These weren't isolated incidents, but part of a pattern of behavior that threatened to destroy everything Irvin had worked for. The man who had overcome poverty and adversity to become one of the NFL's greatest receivers was now a walking time bomb, capable of explosive violence at any moment. Irvin's career came to an abrupt end on October 10, 1999, during a game against the Philadelphia Eagles when he suffered a career-ending neck injury. The moment was captured not just by television cameras, but by the emotional response of his teammate and friend. Sanders' presence at that moment, praying over his injured friend, symbolized the genuine care beneath their public personas. Irvin was diagnosed with spinal stenosis, a narrowing of the spinal column that had gone undetected throughout his career. The injury forced Irvin's retirement at age 33, ending not just a brilliant career, but also serving as a wake-up call about the destructive path he had been on. For Sanders, watching his friend's career end in such dramatic fashion was a reminder of football's fragility and the importance of the relationships built along the way. But retirement wouldn't end Irvin's struggles. If anything, the loss of football, the one constant in his life that had provided structure and purpose, would lead him into even darker territory. The awful truth that Deion Sanders knows about Michael Irvin extends far beyond these violent incidents. It's a truth about addiction, desperation, and how close one man came to losing everything that mattered to him. The rise and fall of the playmaker, building an empire of excess. To understand how Michael Irvin became capable of the violence and self-destruction we've just witnessed, we need to go back to the beginning, to the rise of a legend and the construction of an empire built on talent, arrogance, and ultimately, excess that would consume everything in its path. Michael Jerome Irvin's story begins in the projects of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where he was born into poverty but blessed with exceptional athletic ability and an unbreakable will to succeed. Drafted 11th overall by the Dallas Cowboys in 1988, Irvin arrived in Dallas with the swagger and confidence that had made him a star at the University of Miami. But even before he reached the professional ranks, there were warning signs of the explosive personality that would later manifest in such devastating ways. His very first day at Miami set the tone for what was to come.
My first day, I'm just a freshman. I get into it at the training table. First of all, I'd never seen this kind of food before, at the meal table. And we had this big offensive lineman. And this dude just bullied everybody, right? And the freshmen have to eat last. I took the tray, smashed it across his head.
This incident wasn't just freshman hazing gone wrong. It was a preview of Irvin's refusal to accept what he saw as disrespect, regardless of the consequences. His college coach, Jimmy Johnson, immediately recognized both Irvin's talent and his potential for trouble.
Jimmy called me in the office. I said, this joker finna send me home. I just got here.
Yeah.
I just got here, right? And then a couple weeks later, we're freshmen working a freshman's workout, right? And we get the music box.
The pattern was already established. Irvin would not back down from confrontation, even when it was clearly in his best interest to do so. This same intensity that made him great on the football field would later manifest in increasingly dangerous ways off it. When Irvin arrived in Dallas, he joined a franchise in transition. The Cowboys were coming off a 3-13 season in 1988, with new coach Jimmy Johnson trying to rebuild the organization from the ground up. Irvin's arrival marked the beginning of what would become one of the most successful and controversial dynasties in NFL history. During his 12-year career with the Dallas Cowboys from 1988 to 1999, Irvin amassed 750 receptions for 11,904 yards and 65 touchdowns, establishing franchise records and earning 5 Pro Bowl selections. As part of the legendary triplets, alongside quarterback Troy Aikman and running back Emmitt Smith, Irvin helped lead Dallas to 3 Super Bowl championships in 1992, 1993, and 1995. But success bred arrogance, and arrogance bred the dangerous belief that normal rules didn't apply to the Dallas Cowboys. The team's party culture emerged from their rapid ascent from 15 in 1989 to Super Bowl champions by 1992, creating an atmosphere where players felt untouchable. The culture shift became most apparent when Jimmy Johnson left the team after the 1993 season, replaced by Barry Switzer, whose coaching philosophy was far more permissive.
How bad did the culture of misbehaving get?
Jimmy kept a tight rein on all of us, even through the off season. All of those off season workouts, they were voluntary, mandatory. So they're voluntary, but you better be here. That kind of a thing, or you may not be here.
With Johnson's discipline removed, the Cowboys players were free to indulge their worst impulses, and Michael Irvin, as the team's emotional leader and biggest star, became the architect of what would become known as the most notorious party house in NFL history.
I mean, back in Dallas, you had the White House, which is, kind of like basically a brothel, if nothing else.
Yeah, and basically, that's what it was, and that's what we did, and we did have an extra house, and after just thinking I didn't want to go to hotels and all the problems that caused.
The White House wasn't just a nickname. It was a 2-story brick residence at 115 Dorset Drive in Irving, Texas, that served as the epicenter of the Cowboys' descent into debauchery. Leased in teammate Alvin Harper's name to shield Irvin, the house cost approximately $2,000 to $3,000 per month in 1990s rates.
So I thought that maybe I should get some guys together and we just buy an extra house, and we did. We had an extra house. It was right around the corner. I mean, you go in the backyard and you can see the practice field. So, we practiced right there.
Which means you could be on the practice field and see the White House.
This proximity wasn't coincidental. It was symbolic of how completely the culture of excess had infiltrated the Cowboys organization. The house was strategically located just 100 yards from the team's Valley Ranch practice facility, creating a surreal dynamic where players could literally see their workplace from their playground. The White House featured 5 themed rooms dedicated to different vices: marijuana rooms, cocaine ecstasy rooms, and areas designated for sexual activities. Irvin served as the self-proclaimed president of this operation, orchestrating logistics with military precision. Weekly gatherings ran from Friday post-practice to Sunday night. 72-hour benders that typically included 10, 20 players, and 50 women, including escorts, strippers recruited from local establishments like Baby Dolls, and fans. The operation was funded by player contributions, with Irvin fronting costs from his substantial salary. It was into this environment that Deion Sanders arrived in 1995. Sanders joined the Cowboys after signing a record $35 million deal, largely due to Irvin's influence. Their friendship had been forged through competition and mutual respect, but it would be tested by the toxic environment they now shared.
How did y'all get Deion to defect and come on over to Dallas after the Frisco run?
Oh, no, that was me. I recruited Deion. He said, yeah. He said, I've been talking to his people. I said, all right, you talk to his people. I'm gonna talk to him. I'm gonna call him.
Right, the source.
Right. So I called him.
Irvin's recruitment of Sanders wasn't just about football. It was about bringing his friend into an empire he had built, an empire where normal rules didn't apply and excess was not just tolerated, but celebrated.
So I told him, I said, hey, listen, I told him I'm gonna set something up for you when you come on in. You come in town, I'm gonna set something up. Then I gotta set this thing up at the club called Guantanamo Mirage. Help me get Deion here.
Sanders, despite his flamboyant, prime-time persona, was notably different from Irvin in his approach to the team's party culture. While Sanders was present at White House gatherings during his 1995 to 1996 tenure, he was described as a peripheral participant rather than an organizer, with his evangelical Christian faith limiting deeper involvement. This difference in approach would become increasingly important as the Cowboys' culture spiraled further out of control. While Irvin dove deeper into excess, Sanders maintained boundaries that would ultimately save him from the worst consequences of the White House era. The parties were described as non-stop orgies with unlimited drugs and alcohol. Players boasted about their exploits, with Irvin admitting years later, "In that room you may be smoking weed. In this room they may be doing X, ecstasy, coke, whatever." The culture's toll became evident through suspensions, injuries, and the team's eventual decline. What had started as a celebration of success had become something much darker, a systematic breakdown of discipline and accountability that would claim careers and destroy lives.
And what bugs me is, as I'm standing here today, I promise you, God whispered it to me. Don't go to that hotel room. I promise you I heard it. I heard it as clearly as we are talking here today. He whispered it to me, and I went anyway.
This admission, made years later, reveals the internal struggle Irvin was experiencing even at the height of his success. He knew his behavior was destructive, but he was unable or unwilling to stop. The empire he had built was consuming him, turning his greatest strengths into his most dangerous weaknesses. The White House operated from approximately 1993 to 1996, representing the peak of the Cowboys' on-field success and the nadir of their off-field behavior. The operation ended abruptly in April 1996, after Irvin's arrest exposed the parties to public scrutiny.
And then a couple weeks later, live on the news. And so Jerry, I was in meetings and Jerry called me. He called me out of the meeting in his office. He said that the story's breaking about this extra house you guys have right around the corner here.
The end of the White House marked the beginning of the end for the Cowboys dynasty. Without the structure that had made them successful, and with the discipline that had kept their excesses in check removed, the team began a decline that would last for decades. For Michael Irvin, the collapse of his empire represented more than just the end of parties. It was the destruction of a world where he had felt powerful and in control. The violence and self-destruction that followed can be seen as the desperate acts of a man trying to maintain control in a world that was rapidly slipping away from him. The awful truth that Deion Sanders knows about Michael Irvin is that the same qualities that made him great, his intensity, his refusal to compromise, his need to be in control, also made him dangerous when those qualities were directed toward destructive ends. Redemption, brotherhood, and the awful truth revealed. The end of Michael Irvin's playing career in 1999 should have marked the beginning of a peaceful transition to retirement in broadcasting. Instead, it ushered in the darkest period of his life, a time when the demons he had been battling for years would nearly consume him completely. And it was during this desperate period that Deion Sanders would prove the true depth of their friendship. Just months after his forced retirement, on March 1st, 2000, Irvin was arrested again for cocaine possession in Irving, Texas. The arrest, following a routine traffic stop, revealed 3.5 grams of cocaine in Irvin's Lincoln Navigator. For a man already on probation from his 1996 conviction, this arrest threatened to send him to prison for up to 7 years. The image of the once mighty playmaker, reduced to a common drug arrest in a hotel parking lot, represented the complete collapse of everything he had built. Without football to provide structure and purpose, Irvin was free-falling into an abyss of addiction and despair. But it was during this period of desperation that Deion Sanders made what might be the most important phone call of Michael Irvin's life. In early 2001, Amid Irvin's post-arrest despair and before his June indictment, Sanders placed a critical call at approximately 6 a.m. from Atlanta. This wasn't a casual check-in between former teammates. Sanders had been watching his friend's descent with growing concern, and he knew that Irvin was at a breaking point. The call lasted 30 minutes, with Sanders sensing Irvin's crisis through mutual friends. What Sanders said during that call would change everything. "Man, look, I don't know what it was or whatever it is, but let's fix it. I love you, my brother." Irvin described the call as tearful and raw, saying, "It breaks my heart. That's what made me scared." This wasn't just a friend offering support. It was an intervention that would serve as the catalyst for Irvin's spiritual transformation. The awful truth that Deion Sanders knew about Michael Irvin wasn't just about the drugs, the violence, or the self-destruction. It was deeper than that. Sanders understood that Irvin's behavior wasn't just about addiction or anger. It was about a fundamental emptiness that football had temporarily filled, but retirement had exposed. The call sparked Irvin's Christian conversion in early 2001, when he joined the Potter's House in Dallas under Pastor T.D. Jakes. Irvin later reflected, "Turned my life over to Christ." With help from Pastor T.D. Jakes and Deion, took 40 years to realize God's hand. The charges from his 2000 arrest were eventually dismissed in November 2001 due to procedural issues, but the spiritual transformation that began with Sanders' call would prove more lasting than any legal resolution. Sanders had seen something in his friend that others had missed, not just the potential for destruction, but the potential for redemption. He understood that beneath all the violence and addiction was a man struggling with pain and emptiness that could only be healed through genuine change. Irvin's broadcasting career began in earnest in 2002 with ESPN, but even in his new role as an analyst, controversies continued to follow him. His past seemed to cast a shadow over everything he did, and critics were quick to question whether someone with his history deserved a platform in the media. In 2007, a woman accused Irvin of sexual assault at a Florida hotel, leading to a civil lawsuit and a $100 million defamation countersuit from Irvin. The case was settled confidentially in 2011, but it demonstrated that Irvin's past would continue to haunt him. In 2017, another sexual assault allegation emerged in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but the Broward County State Attorney's Office declined to file charges due to insufficient evidence, citing video evidence that contradicted the accuser's claims. Throughout all these controversies, Deion Sanders remained a constant source of support for his friend. Their friendship, forged in the crucible of 1990s Dallas, had evolved into something deeper, a brotherhood based on mutual accountability, shared faith, and unconditional love. But perhaps the most public test of Irvin's character came in February 2023 during Super Bowl Elefant Week in Phoenix. A female employee at the Renaissance Phoenix downtown hotel accused Irvin of making lewd comments and unwanted physical contact during a brief lobby interaction. The allegation led to Irvin's immediate suspension from NFL Network and ESPN, causing him to miss covering Super Bowl LVW. In response, Irvin filed a $100 million defamation lawsuit against Marriott. Irvin's response to this latest controversy revealed how much he had learned from his previous experiences, but also how the wounds from his past still ran deep.
But this sickens me. This sickens me. Because in this great country, this takes me back to a time where a white man would accuse a white woman would accuse a black man of something. And they would take a bunch of guys that were above the law, run in the barn, put a rope around his foot and drag him through the mud and hang him by the tree.
The raw emotion in Irvin's response reflected not just frustration with this particular situation, but the accumulated pain of decades of scrutiny and judgment. His comparison to lynching was controversial, but it revealed the deep trauma that these repeated allegations had inflicted on him. When surveillance video was finally released in March 2023, it showed a brief, seemingly cordial conversation between Irvin and the employee, contradicting many of the allegations. The video became a vindication for Irvin, but the damage to his reputation and career had already been done.
To sue the hotel. And then after the judge, they told him, you gotta show him the tape. They still wouldn't turn it over. What saved me was those three dudes that I went and took the pic with. Because they woke up the next morning and saw all the news. And they were like, that didn't happen.
The case was settled confidentially in September 2023, with Irvin returning to NFL Network, but the incident had taken its toll, both professionally and personally. Throughout this latest controversy, Deion Sanders once again stood by his friend. Sanders publicly supported Irvin during the crisis, tweeting, "Primetime stands with playmaker. False accusations hit hard. #know your worth." In March 2023, this unwavering support from Sanders speaks to something deeper than just friendship. It reveals a man who has seen his friend at his absolute worst and still believes in his capacity for good. Sanders understands that Irvin's journey hasn't been perfect, but he also knows that redemption is possible for anyone willing to do the work. The most powerful demonstration of their friendship came during Sanders' health crisis in 2025. In May 2025, Sanders underwent surgery for bladder cancer and blood clots, losing 25 pounds and stepping away from his Colorado Buffaloes coaching duties. For a man who had always been the picture of health and vitality, this medical emergency was a sobering reminder of mortality. Irvin immediately dropped everything to be by his friend's side. He made multiple visits to Sanders' Texas ranch, sharing humorous videos to lift his friend's spirits and providing the kind of emotional support that only comes from deep, genuine friendship. At the Big 12 Media Days in July 2025, a recovering Sanders thanked Irvin publicly. "Where's Mike Irvin, playmaker? Man, I love you to life. Don't make me cry." Sanders praised Irvin as the real deal while slamming vultures who had exploited his illness. This moment, captured on video and witnessed by hundreds of media members, revealed the true nature of their relationship. Here was Deion Sanders, one of the most confident and self-assured athletes in history, openly expressing his love and gratitude for Michael Irvin in front of the world.
Mac was the same way, man. Mac was a dog, man. Right. And Mac had a whole different type of game. And Jerry was too. Andre Rison was a dog.
Right.
Yes, I played with some guys that can go to work, and we went to work.
The awful truth is that Irvin's journey from the projects of Miami to NFL stardom came with a psychological cost that he's still paying today. The same drive that lifted him out of poverty also made him incapable of accepting what he perceived as disrespect or injustice, leading to the violent outbursts and self-destructive behavior that nearly destroyed his life. Today, at 59 years old, Michael Irvin continues his broadcasting career while mentoring young players and maintaining his close friendship with Sanders. Their latest interaction in September 2025 saw Irvin comparing their dynamic to popular podcasters, showing the enduring nature of their bond. Like this video? Don't forget to explore more similar content through the suggested cards on your screen.